The whole thing is fucking insane. It's insane. It's the whole thing is nuts. Like fuckery with those watches. Like I brought my watch. I have a Rolex that my friend Lorenzo gave me, and I brought it to the watch store, and I said, this thing's always fast. I said, it's always like after a couple months, it's like 5 minutes fast. And they go, yep. They go, yeah.
Really?
It's just what it does.
Okay.
And I go, hold on. I go, so you're telling me that it just is always going to be fast? They're like, yeah. It's just like every few months you got to like reset it.
It seems like they should recalibrate that thing.
They can't. They tried. They say every few months, whether it's 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, it's going to be a couple minutes fast.
Okay, it seems like they should really recalibrate that, because if it's always fast, you can just delete those minutes.
You need to fucking kick down the door at Rolex and go, you bitches are lazy. Okay, let's look at watches. There's no real improvement in performance, right? I mean, they're beautiful, but I mean, the performance difference between now and 10 years ago is not clear.
You thought a Rolex meant you made it. Success, precision, legacy. But what if that crown on your wrist is nothing more than a $25 illusion dressed up in Swiss fairy tales? Joe Rogan and Elon Musk just cracked open one of the most elite scams in luxury history, and what they exposed could take down the entire watch industry. For decades, people believed they were buying into a legacy, a piece of heritage, a handcrafted dream sealed in gold and stamped, made in Switzerland or made in France. Whether it was a Rolex on the wrist, a Birkin on the arm, or a Louis Vuitton trunk passed down through generations, consumers weren't just spending money. They were investing in status, authenticity, and history. They were sold the illusion that luxury meant integrity, scarcity, and timeless craftsmanship. But what if I told you that illusion just shattered, publicly, violently, and irreversibly? Because according to a conversation that went nuclear on the Joe Rogan Experience, that fantasy is officially over. In the middle of a seemingly harmless discussion about branding and AI, Elon Musk, out of nowhere, dropped a name he wasn't supposed to say. He looked Rogan dead in the eye and said, "Do you really think Rolex makes everything in Switzerland?" Rogan paused. You could hear the silence swell. Then Elon smiled, leaned back, and added, "The movements are, maybe, but the cases, the bracelets, half the tooling, China. And not even secretly. It's just that no one's asking the right questions." And that's when it hit. The luxury world wasn't built on craftsmanship. It was built on illusion. Smoke, mirrors, and airtight NDAs. But this wasn't just a theory tossed down on a podcast. Because as Elon spoke, Rogan pulled up his laptop, live on camera, and began reading the documents. Whistleblower testimony, export manifests, hidden factory contracts from Shenzhen. And that's when Joe's jaw dropped. These weren't just off-brand suppliers. These were the same facilities producing parts for top-tier Swiss-made and French-made brands under aliases. Subcontractors, shell companies, a digital trail buried in enough corporate misdirection to confuse even the most seasoned financial investigator. One file revealed a joint venture between a watch brand with a crown logo. You can guess which one. And a parts manufacturer operating out of Guangzhou, complete with diagrams of class molds, dials, and bezels, all identical to those on models retailing for over $20,000. The only thing Swiss about them was the final assembly. Barely. And it didn't stop with watches. Joe scrolled further and found internal memos from fashion conglomerates. Hermes, LVMH, Richemont, strategizing on how to maintain the illusion of exclusivity while silently increasing Chinese factory output. Even worse, some of the so-called imperfect bags and watch parts were being white-labeled and sold through discount retailers like Walmart and third-party online stores under ghost brands. Yes, people were unknowingly buying discounted luxury leftovers, products made in the same factories by the same workers as their $10,000 counterparts, but stripped of the elite label and quietly funneled to the masses. It was a betrayal, financial, emotional, cultural, because these weren't just products. These were heirlooms, engagement gifts, graduation milestones, the trophy of one's first bonus, or the symbol of a lifelong dream. People spent entire paychecks, took out loans, got on year-long wait lists, begged sales associates for favors, only to discover they weren't buying history. They were buying performance art, mass-produced theater with a luxury costume. And it's not that Chinese craftsmanship is inherently inferior. That's not the scandal. The scandal is the deception. The decades of curated marketing telling consumers their purchases were rooted in European soil, in the hands of ancient artisans, in workshops passed down through centuries. When in fact, many of these pieces were being mass-tooled on assembly lines half a world away, and then marked up by 900% before being handed to a well-lit boutique associate trained to sell you a dream. The truth? The luxury houses knew exactly what they were doing, and they never expected anyone to talk. Until now, because on that podcast, Joe and Elon didn't just whisper a conspiracy. They opened the floodgates. And what came pouring out? Receipts, names, factory locations, product codes, and above all, evidence. The kind that left millions of luxury consumers staring at their prized possessions not with pride, but with a creeping, nauseating doubt. What exactly did they just spend their life savings on? And why are some of those same exclusive parts showing up on TikTok, in Chinese factories, in Walmart bins, and in lawsuits the luxury world is scrambling to bury? That's what we're about to expose. It started with something small, almost laughably small. A throwaway comment in the middle of a Joe Rogan episode. A conversation so casual, so offhand, most people wouldn't have thought twice about it. Joe was talking about watches. He had just returned from a hunting trip, talking about gear, durability, tools that withstand the elements. Then he said it. You know what's weird? My Rolex keeps running fast. Not by a lot, just like 10 seconds a day. But for what I paid, shouldn't it be, I don't know, perfect? At first, it seemed like a minor inconvenience. A classic Joe Rogan moment, part rant, part curiosity. But across the table, Elon Musk raised an eyebrow. Not in confusion, in recognition. He didn't laugh. He didn't shrug. He leaned in and said, "That's not a defect. That's by design." The room went still. Rogan looked confused. "What do you mean by design? Like they wanted to run fast?" Musk nodded slowly. "No, not on purpose. But let's just say a lot of these companies stopped prioritizing mechanical precision a long time ago. It's not really about timekeeping anymore. It's about storytelling." That's when it shifted. What began as a joke about a slightly off-kilter wristwatch cracked open a deeper, more unsettling conversation. Elon wasn't just talking about one Rolex running fast. He was talking about an entire industry that had quietly walked away from its original promise and dared its consumers not to notice. Joe started pushing. "But aren't these things like hand-assembled in Switzerland? Tested like crazy? That's what they sell you on, right?" Elon smirked. "Yeah, the marketing's airtight. You got some guy in a leather apron polishing gears in a stone cottage in Geneva. But the reality is a bit less romantic. Most of the parts, the assembly, the polishing, it's been offloaded. Factories in Asia. Machines doing most of the work. Human hands are still involved, sure, but not in the way the brochures suggest." Joe froze. You could feel the tension start to creep in. He checked his wrist, looked down at the very Rolex he was just complaining about. Suddenly, it didn't feel like a small issue anymore. Suddenly, it felt like he'd been duped. Elon continued, casually, like it was just common knowledge. "Rolex knows the average buyer doesn't actually understand horology. They're not watch nerds. They're status seekers. So they stopped building for precision and started building for emotion. They know you'll never put on a timegrapher. You'll just take a picture of it next to your steering wheel." That was the first real crack in the illusion. Because Joe, like millions of others, had bought the Rolex story. The craftsmanship, the heritage, the idea that you weren't just wearing a watch, you were wearing a legacy. But now, in real time, that legacy was starting to feel like a performance. Like set design, like a Hollywood prop that looked real on camera but was hollow up close. And once the doubt sets in, it spreads. Joe started asking more questions. What about Omega? What about Audemars Piguet? Are they doing the same thing? Elon didn't name names. He didn't have to. He just said, let's just say the definition of Swiss-made has a lot of legal loopholes. You only need 60% of the production cost to come from Switzerland. And cost is a flexible thing when you know how to inflate your numbers. Suddenly, the math started to make sense. Why so many luxury brands could offer so many models. Why waitlists felt artificial. Why factory tours were invitation only and highly choreographed. And why, when you finally did get your dream watch or luxury bag, something always felt just slightly off. Because the truth is, when you believe you're buying excellence, you forgive the small flaws. A 10-second gain? No big deal. A slightly uneven stitch? Human error. But once you start to suspect the illusion, every flaw becomes a red flag. Every imperfection becomes evidence. And that's when it begins. The sleepless nights. The Reddit rabbit holes. The TikToks from Chinese factory workers showing near-identical parts being made for knockoffs and high-end brand alike. The lawsuits buried under NDAs. The digital footprints in obscure trade databases. The realization that Swiss made doesn't always mean Swiss crafted, and made in France doesn't always mean touched by a French artisan. It all started with a fast-running Rolex. But what Joe and Elon exposed, intentionally or not, was that luxury isn't about perfection anymore. It's about perception. And once that perception shatters, it doesn't just ruin one product. It ruins the whole story. Joe Rogan and Elon Musk didn't just talk watches. They dropped an atom bomb. Midway through their already viral episode, Musk leaned in and said, "If the public ever saw what I've seen, some of these CEOs would be in jail." Straight up. Fraud. International fraud. Silence. Then Joe pressed. Over watches? Elon didn't blink. Not just watches brands. Whole brands built on deception. The Swiss-made stamp? Half the time it's cosmetic. They slap it on components made in Chinese factories that don't even pass safety inspection in the EU. They're laundering prestige. That was the moment. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy. Like they both knew they'd crossed a line no one was supposed to acknowledge publicly. Then Rogan, clearly stunned, started reading off his notes. Leaked invoices. Manufacturing manifests. He read one line slowly. Shipment 274, A. Movement parts from Shenzhen to Geneva. Authorized for reassembly and final inspection. Cost masking approved. Elon cut in. Cost masking, that's the trick. They inflate the Swiss labor costs on paper to meet the 60% requirement for the label. But the parts? Screws, rotors, even some balance wheels? Shenzhen, Dongguan, Yiwu. It was a jaw-dropper. Not just for the listeners. For luxury connoisseurs, for collectors, for anyone who'd ever waited 3 years for a Submariner or paid 5 figures for a Speedmaster. The illusion was crumbling. And then came the dagger. Joe held up a printed internal memo, anonymous source redacted. The subject line read, "Client-facing visibility. No China origin disclosure under any circumstance." And in case that wasn't enough, Elon casually added, "I've seen one of these brands send empty cases to Switzerland, then backfill them with movements from China once they're stamped. It's not even gray market. It's cartel-level laundering." No one was laughing anymore. The podcast dropped. The internet exploded. Within 48 hours, it became clear this wasn't just a conversation. It was a damn breach. First came the leaks. Whistleblowers. Anonymous insiders. Factory workers from Guangdong uploading shaky cell phone footage showing rows of luxury watch components on industrial conveyor belts. Not fakes. Real components. Real logos. Real serial numbers. Then came the voice notes. One from a female worker in her early 20s, translated from Mandarin, went viral. They told us it was for export to Switzerland. We assemble, they disassemble, then reassemble. They say it's for a special client. We are not allowed to ask who. Then came emails. A leaked PDF chain showed a major luxury conglomerate coordinating shipments between a Chinese supplier and a bonded warehouse in Zurich. The subject line? Maintain dual records for audit compliance. One of the attached documents detailed how to backdate manufacturing logs to make parts appear older, and thus, European. A TikTok sleuth went viral breaking down GPS metadata on one of the shipment containers. Final destination? Geneva. Comment sections turned into war zones. Forums like WatchesSeek and Reddit's r/watches went full red alert. Longtime collectors began posting side-by-side comparisons. Here's my $15,000 Omega. And here's the Alibaba version. Guess which one keeps better time? The answers were chilling. What began as speculation turned into something undeniable. Proof. And when the receipts hit, the celebrities ran. Kylie Jenner deleted 6 Instagram posts featuring her Cartier stack. Gone. Wiped clean. No explanation. Drake postponed the release of his new music video after eagle-eyed fans noticed he was wearing a Patek Philippe Nautilus, one of the brands named in the invoice trail. Within hours, his stylist unfollowed multiple luxury watch accounts. On TikTok, influencers went full scorched earth. One creator with 12 million followers smashed his Rolex date just on camera. The caption? $13K for a Chinese cosplay? Never again. Another pulled out a magnifying glass and dissected a Hermes timepiece she once received in a PR drop. Y'all, the stitching isn't even consistent. This isn't heritage. This is wholesale deception. Even Logan Paul, whose watch collection is valued in the millions, posted a grim video saying, "You think you're collecting history, but turns out you're just funding a branding scam." They lied to us. All of us. Brand loyalty evaporated overnight. Hashtag SwissScam trended for 3 days straight. TikTok duets raged with breakdowns of luxury manipulation. Factory workers became folk heroes. Watch influencers lost thousands of followers. Some started issuing apologies. Others just disappeared. And the most damning sign of all, a viral video showed a Rolex boutique in Beverly Hills with 0 customers inside. The sign on the door read, "Closed for inventory," but the comments had already decided. No, closed for cover-up. Rolex was just the crack in the dam. The water's pouring in, and the flood is sweeping away everything in its path. Omega, once hailed for its moon landing legacy, is now under audit by 2 international trade commissions after leaked customs reports show irregularities in component sourcing. Patek Philippe, the holy grail of haute horology, has quietly pulled advertising campaigns across Europe and Asia. Tag Heuer? They've gone radio silent, deleting press contact emails from their website overnight. Behind closed doors, NDAs are being rewritten at a frantic pace, not to protect the brands, but to contain the insiders. Former factory contractors are being issued retroactive gag orders. PR teams are holding daily crisis meetings, some under literal lockdown. And the Big Five, Rolex, Swatch Group, Richemont, LVMH, and Audemars Piguet, have all launched internal audits under the vague umbrella of supply chain reevaluation. War rooms have been activated. Private investigators are being hired, not to find whistleblowers, but to predict who might talk next. Brands that once bragged about waiting lists now find themselves begging retailers not to cancel bulk orders. This isn't just a scandal. It's a collapse of trust. But while the brands panic behind mirrored boardroom glass, the real heartbreak is unfolding in quiet Swiss mountain towns, where watchmakers still use loops, files, and hand tools. The ones who actually practice the art these brands claim to champion. Take Marcel, a third-generation horologist in La Chaux-de-Fonds. For 40 years, he hand-finished bridges and polished her billions under a single desk lamp. His work was always precise, always Swiss. But now, orders have slowed. Clients are canceling. And Marcel's son, who was set to take over the family workshop, just left the industry entirely. "People don't believe us anymore," Marcel said in an interview. "They think we're part of the lie." Workshops are closing. Apprenticeships are evaporating. The very craftsmen these brands used in their glossy documentaries, the white-coated symbols of purity, are now collateral damage. They're being buried under suspicion while factory middlemen walk free. This isn't just a branding scandal. It's cultural cannibalism. The soul of Swiss watchmaking is being devoured by the greed of the institutions that swore to protect it. Because Rolex was never just a watch. It was an identity, a reward, a rite of passage. The moment you slipped one on, you weren't just telling time. You were telling your story. Success, stability, class, legacy. And now, people are waking up to a bitter truth. They weren't buying engineering. They were buying performance art. The Swiss-made stamp was never a guarantee of craftsmanship. It was a stage prop. The real product wasn't the watch. It was the illusion. Rolex sold you permanence in an impermanent world. Omega sold you achievement. Patek sold you heirloom. Tag sold you motion. And all of it was tied together with whispered promises that heritage meant honesty and that tradition meant truth. But that illusion has shattered. The dream has turned synthetic. And when dreams turn counterfeit, the betrayal runs deeper than dollars. It strikes at the psyche. People who saved for years, who bought in for love, who gifted these watches at weddings and funerals, they're the ones carrying the heaviest weight. Because they didn't just buy a watch. They bought a belief. And now it's broken. So what happens when time catches up with the timekeepers? For over a century, Rolex defined itself as the master of time. Reliable, unyielding, eternal. But now, time isn't their product, it's their judge. Each passing day brings new leaks, new evidence, new silences. And with each tick of the second hand, the illusion that once cloaked them in prestige begins to unravel. No statement, no apology, no denial, just silence. A silence that says more than any press release ever could. A silence that echoes like a closing vault door. A silence that sounds a lot like guilt. Because the countdown has already begun. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time is no longer their brand. Time is their reckoning.